The mountain trail was silent until a cry for help shattered the air. A man lay bleeding on the ground, his leg torn open, life slipping away. His expensive watch ticked uselessly, and his phone showed no signal. This was Richard Hale, one of the wealthiest men in the state. But in that moment, his wealth meant nothing. Out of nowhere, a woman in scrubs rushed to him. Her name was Danielle Johnson, a nurse who had come seeking peace, not an emergency. She knelt beside him, hands steady, eyes fierce. "Stay with me," she whispered, pressing against his wound, fighting to keep him alive. When rescuers finally arrived, Richard was still breathing because of her. But the next day, Danielle's life collapsed. Instead of being praised, she was fired. Her only crime? Saving a life while being a black woman in the wrong place. She thought it was over until the ground shook outside her house. 2 helicopters landed, and what stepped out would change everything. Danielle Johnson had never thought her life would turn into a headline-worthy drama. She was a nurse, simply put. For years, she had worked double shifts in the emergency ward, dealing with everything from broken bones to gunshot wounds. Her colleagues used to joke that Danielle didn't just carry medical supplies in her bag, she had a heart too big for her own good. But beneath her calm smile, there was always a quiet exhaustion. Being a black woman in a primarily white hospital wasn't easy. Every decision she made seemed to be second-guessed. Every achievement was brushed aside with backhanded compliments. Still, Danielle kept showing up, kept proving herself, because she believed her work wasn't about recognition. It was about saving lives. On her rare day off, Danielle had decided to hike up into the mountains, far from the constant beeping of hospital machines. Nature was her therapy. Fresh air, tall pines, and the kind of silence that made her forget the weight of the world. She packed lightly, carrying only water, snacks, and a first aid kit, which she always kept just in case. She didn't know how vital that kit would be. A few hours into the trail, she heard something strange, an echoing cry carried by the wind. At first, she thought it was an animal, but as she drew closer, her trained ears recognized the unmistakable sound of human pain. She sprinted off the trail, branches snapping against her arms, until she came across him. The man lay sprawled on the ground, his expensive hiking gear torn, his leg bleeding profusely. His backpack looked heavy with supplies, but useless in this moment. His face, pale with shock, was instantly familiar. Danielle had seen him in newspapers before. His name was Richard Hale, a millionaire entrepreneur known for his ruthless business, deals, and a lifestyle that most people only dreamed of. But right now, he didn't look powerful. He looked fragile. Danielle dropped beside him. "Sir, can you hear me?" Richard groaned, his lips trembling. I can't move. Please, help me." Her instincts took over. She cleaned the wound, applied pressure, and fashioned a tourniquet. With the precision of someone who had done it 100 times before, she spoke calmly, keeping his eyes open, forcing him to stay conscious. "You're not going to die here. Do you hear me? Stay with me." The minutes felt like hours. Finally, the distant roar of a rescue helicopter reached them. Relief swept across Richard's face as rescuers carried him away. He looked back at Danielle, his gaze lingering as if he wanted to say something, but didn't. By the time she hiked back down, Danielle felt a quiet pride. She had saved a man's life, and that was enough for her. Or so she thought. The very next day, when she walked into the hospital for her shift, the atmosphere was different. Whispers followed her down the hall. A senior nurse avoided her eyes. Even the head doctor, who usually greeted her with a curt nod, barely acknowledged her presence. Something was wrong. By lunchtime, she was summoned into the administrator's office. The room was cold, the blinds half drawn. Behind the desk sat Mr. Greenfield, the hospital director, a man with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Danielle," he began, folding his hands, "there have been concerns about your conduct." Danielle blinked. "Concerns? Sir, I don't understand." He leaned back. "Word has reached us about your involvement with Mr. Richard Hale yesterday. Some are questioning whether it was appropriate for you to provide medical assistance outside your designated duties. There are also rumors about your behavior." Danielle's jaw tightened. "Rumors. I saved his life. He would have bled out if I hadn't been there." Greenfield sighed as though her words were an inconvenience. "Be that as it may, Danielle. Appearances matter. You've drawn attention we do not need. Effective immediately. Your services here are no longer required. The words hit her like a physical blow. Fired for saving a life. She walked out of the office in a daze, her colleagues watching silently, some with pity, others with something darker in their eyes. At home, she collapsed on her couch, staring at her blood-stained scrubs. The injustice burned inside her, but so did the fear. Without her job, how would she pay rent? What would she tell her family? Danielle had no idea that while she sat in despair, Richard Hale, the man whose life she had saved, was already making decisions that would set events in motion far beyond anything she could have imagined. Because Richard Hale wasn't the kind of man to forget a debt. And Danielle was about to find out just how much her act of kindness would change her destiny. Danielle barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the millionaire's pale face, the blood soaking into the mountain grass, her hands working frantically to save him. And then, just as vividly, she saw the cold expression of Director Greenfield as he ended her career with a few careless words. She sat in her tiny apartment kitchen, a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. Her phone buzzed with a message from her younger brother. "Hey, sis, how's work? Don't forget Mom's birthday dinner this weekend." Danielle's chest tightened. How could she tell them she no longer had a job? That she had been punished for doing the very thing she was trained to do? Save lives? The anger built inside her, but she forced herself to breathe. One day at a time, she told herself. The millionaire's perspective across town. Richard Hale lay in a private hospital suite, his leg wrapped in clean bandages, machines beeping steadily around him. He should have been relieved. He was alive, after all, but his mind kept circling back to the woman who had saved him. He remembered the calm in her eyes, the way her hands hadn't shaken even as she pressed down on his wound. He had built an empire by trusting instincts, and his instincts told him something. Danielle Johnson was not just any nurse. "Find her," Richard ordered his assistant the next morning. "I owe that woman my life." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, I heard. She was let go from her hospital." Richard frowned. "Fired? For saving me?" His voice hardened. "Unacceptable. Get me the details." Danielle faces backlash. Meanwhile, Danielle's situation grew worse. Her firing spread like wildfire through whispers in the community. Some neighbors offered pity, others judgment. Aid. The grocery store, she overheard two women whispering behind her. "That's her, the nurse who got too close to Richard Hale. Some people just don't know their place." Danielle's cheeks burned. It wasn't just about losing her job now, it was about her reputation, her dignity. That night, as she sat staring at the eviction notice that had arrived in her mailbox, her chest tightened with despair. She had given everything to her profession, and in return, she was left with nothing. An unexpected visit. 2 days later, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, the quiet of Danielle's neighborhood was shattered by a thunderous roar. Her window rattled. Dishes clinked in the cupboard. She rushed outside with the rest of the neighbors, shielding her eyes against the dust spiraling through the air. And then she saw them. Not one, but two massive helicopters descending onto her street, their blades whipping the air into chaos. Children screamed in excitement. Adults gawked in disbelief. The first helicopter bore the emblem of Hale Industries. The second carried no markings at all, sleek and dark like something out of a movie. Danielle's heart raced. What on earth was happening? The doors swung open. From the first helicopter emerged Richard Hale himself, walking with a cane, but standing. Tall, his suit was immaculate, his presence commanding. From the second helicopter stepped a group of men in sharp uniforms, government officials judging by their demeanor. The crowd gasped. Phones were raised, recording every moment. Richard's eyes found Danielle instantly, and for a moment, the world fell silent. A life-changing offer. "Danielle Johnson," Richard said, his voice carrying above the noise. "You saved my life, and I hear this town punished you for it. That ends today." The officials behind him exchanged glances. One stepped forward. "Miss Johnson, on behalf of the state, we're here to recognize your extraordinary bravery. You are to be honored publicly." Danielle's mouth fell open. "Honored? But I was fired. They called my actions inappropriate." Richard cut her off, his voice firm. "No, they called them inappropriate it due to prejudice and ignorance, but I will not let that stand. You risked everything for me, and now I will risk everything for you." The crowd erupted into murmurs. Cameras flashed. Danielle felt her knees weaken. She hadn't asked for recognition, only fairness, yet here it was, in a form she never imagined. The backlash intensifies. But not everyone celebrated. That evening, as news of the event spread across the internet, the reaction was split. Some praised Danielle as a hero. Others twisted the story, suggesting she had sought attention or that she had taken advantage of the situation. Online comments cut deep. She only helped him to get famous. Bet she staged the whole thing. Why would a millionaire care about some nurse? Must be more to the story. Danielle tried not to read them, but the words found her anyway. Even worse, Greenfield, her former director, went on local television. "While we acknowledge Miss Johnson's actions, hospitals must uphold professional boundaries. We cannot condone behavior that compromises our reputation." Danielle's hands trembled as she watched. It wasn't just about her job anymore. It was about her name, her integrity. Richard's bold move. Richard wasn't one to let lies go unchallenged. The very next day, he held a press conference. Cameras filled the hall, reporters buzzing with anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, "I stand before you alive today because of one person, Danielle Johnson. Without her courage, I would be dead. Yet instead of being celebrated, she was fired. This is not just an insult to her. It's an insult to every healthcare worker who sacrifices for others." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Therefore, I am announcing two things. First, I am funding a new foundation in Danielle's name, dedicated to supporting minority nurses who face discrimination. Second, I am offering Danielle Johnson the position of Chief Medical Officer at my personal medical initiative, effective immediately." Gasps filled the room. Reporters shouted questions. Danielle, standing quietly at the side, felt her world tilt. Chief Medical Officer? She was just an ER nurse. The offer was overwhelming. But even as tears welled in her eyes, fear gnawed at her. Accepting such a role would paint an even bigger target on her back. Influential people already hated her for saving Richard Hale. What would they do if she stood beside him in power? A storm on the horizon, and she was right to worry. Because in the shadows of that press conference, not everyone was applauding. Behind closed doors, influential figures whispered. Some were business rivals of Richard. Others were hospital executives who didn't want their prejudices exposed. Together, they began to scheme. Danielle had survived, saving a life. But now, she was about to face something far more dangerous. A battle against people who wanted her silenced. And the storm was only beginning to rise. Danielle never imagined her life would spiral out of control this way. Just a week ago, she was another nurse fighting for respect in a crowded hospital. Now, she stood under blinding camera lights, her name splashed across headlines, her face debated in living rooms and online forums alike. The offer Richard Hale made to lead his new medical initiative still echoed in her ears. It was an opportunity beyond her wildest dreams. But deep down, Danielle knew this wasn't just a promotion. It was a war declaration against the very system that had crushed her. And that system was preparing to strike back. The threats begin. One night, as Danielle returned to her apartment, she noticed a white envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a single typed sentence: "Stay in your place or you'll regret it." Her hands trembled. She glanced over her shoulder, heart pounding. The street outside was empty, but she felt eyes watching her from the shadows. Later that week, her car tires were slashed. Another day, she found graffiti scrawled across her door. Opportunist. Danielle tried to stay strong, but the pressure gnawed at her. She called Richard once, her voice shaking. "I don't know if I can do this. They're trying to break me." On the other end, Richard's tone was steady. "Danielle, I built my empire with enemies clawing at my back, but I never had someone like you by my side. If you quit now, they win. If you stand, we both win." His words lit a fire inside her. She had been silenced too many times before. Not anymore. The council confrontation. A week later, Danielle was summoned to a private council meeting organized by the city's healthcare board. The room was polished mahogany, filled with men in suits and women in pearls, their smiles tight. and cold Dot Greenfield, her former hospital director, sat at the head of the table. His voice dripped with condescension. "Miss Johnson, we've gathered to address the disruption your newfound fame has caused." Danielle held her head high. "Disruption? I saved a life. You embarrass this city," another board member snapped. "You've allowed the media to paint us as villains. Do you realize the damage you've caused?" Danielle clenched her fists under the table. "I didn't cause the damage. It was caused when you fired me for doing my job, because of the color of my skin." Gasps rippled across the room. For a moment, silence reigned. Then Greenfield smirked. "Careful, Miss Johnson. Accusations like that can ruin careers." Danielle's eyes blazed. "My career was already ruined. You did that. Now I'm standing here not because of you, but despite you." The tension crackled. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, but before Greenfield could respond, the doors burst open. Richard's intervention. Richard Hale strode in, cane tapping against the floor. His presence commanding. Cameras followed him. He had brought the press. "If you want to talk about disruption," Richard boomed, "let's talk about the real issue. This woman saved my life when no one else was there to help, and you fired her. You punished her. For what? For being competent? For being brave? Or simply because she didn't fit your mold?" The board shifted uncomfortably as flashes went off, reporters scribbling every word. Greenfield's face turned pale. "Mr. Hale, this is a private—" "No," Richard cut in sharply. "This is public. The people deserve to know how their healthcare leaders treat their own heroes." He turned toward Danielle, his voice softening. "You don't need their approval anymore. From this moment on, you answer to no counsel. You answer only to yourself." The room erupted in chaos. Board members shouting, reporters firing questions, Greenfield sweating through his collar, and in the middle of it all, Danielle stood taller than she ever had before. The final blow. As Danielle left the building with Richard at her side, she knew the fight wasn't over. Enemies still lurked in the shadows, but something had shifted. The world had seen the truth. Later that night, Richard called her again. "Danielle," he said quietly, "I fought countless battles in boardrooms, but what you did today, standing up against them, speaking your truth, was braver than anything I've ever seen." Danielle smiled faintly, tears welling in her eyes. "I wasn't just standing for me, Richard. I was standing for every nurse, every black woman who's ever been told she doesn't belong." There was silence on the line. Then Richard whispered, "And because of you, they'll never be able to ignore it again." But neither of them knew. Their biggest test was still ahead, because while the council had been exposed, the people Danielle had embarrassed weren't done with her yet. In the shadows of the city, a darker plan was already taking shape. The storm had passed, but the scars remained. Danielle sat in her small living room, the hum of her refrigerator mixing with the faint echoes of the chaos she had faced in the last few weeks. Helicopters landing at her house, reporters chasing her for interviews, threats scrawled on her door, and a council trying to silence her. It all felt unreal, like scenes from a movie she had somehow stumbled into. And yet, despite the fear, despite the exhaustion, one truth burned brighter than all the rest. She had not been broken. A new beginning. The following week, Danielle officially accepted Richard Hale's offer. She became the chief medical officer of his new foundation, one dedicated to protecting and uplifting minority healthcare workers who faced discrimination. The announcement sent shockwaves across the nation. Reporters gathered outside the new office as Danielle walked in, head held high. Her once modest scrubs had been replaced with a crisp suit, but her heart remained the same. She wasn't here for power, or money, or recognition. She was here to ensure no nurse would ever be punished for saving a life again. Her first initiative was personal, a scholarship fund for young black women pursuing nursing degrees. At the launch event, Danielle stood before a room full of aspiring students, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I was told I didn't belong," she said. "I was told my place was beneath others. However, the truth is that our place is wherever courage is needed, wherever compassion saves lives. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." The applause shook the walls. Richard's gratitude. Meanwhile, Richard remained by her side, not as a savior, but as someone who owed a debt he could never repay. He often told reporters, "Danielle saved my life once. Now, she's saving saving countless others. But in private, he said something different. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the rooftop of his office building, Richard turned to her. "You know, Danielle," he said softly, "you didn't just save my life that day. You gave me a reason to use my fortune for something more than myself." Danielle smiled faintly. "And you gave me a reason to keep fighting when I wanted to give up." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the orange glow of the setting sun washing over them. Two people from different worlds, bound together by a moment of blood and courage on a lonely mountain trail. Justice served. News eventually broke that Greenfield and several board members had been investigated. Under mounting pressure, they resigned, their reputations tarnished. For once, the system that had protected them turned its back on them. Danielle didn't celebrate their downfall with glee. Instead, she felt relief, not because they were gone, but because their absence made room for something better. She knew the fight against prejudice was far from over. But this victory, her victory, was proof that change was possible. The final visit weeks later, Danielle returned to the mountain trail where it all began. The air was crisp, the trees swaying gently as if whispering secrets of resilience. She stood at the very spot where she had found Richard bleeding, the grass now green and unmarked by the memory of blood. She knelt, brushing her hand across the earth. "This is where everything changed," she whispered. A voice behind her spoke. "And where it all began." She turned. Richard stood there, leaning lightly on his cane, a smile tugging at his lips. "I had to see it again," he said. "The place where an angel showed up." Danielle laughed softly, shaking her head. "I'm no angel, just a nurse who refused to look away." "Sometimes," Richard replied, "that's exactly what angels do." The lesson. As the two walked back down the trail, Danielle felt lighter than she had in years. She had lost her job, her reputation had been dragged through the mud, and she had faced the kind of hate that could crush anyone's spirit. But she had also found strength she didn't know she had. She had found allies in unexpected places, and most importantly, she had discovered that courage, once ignited, could spark change far beyond a single life. The helicopters, the headlines, the chaos, it would all fade with time. But the lesson would remain. That kindness, even when punished, has the power to change the world. And Danielle Johnson's story was proof of it.